Welcome. Thanks for joining us today. This is our session on Microsoft Excel linking and sharing data. I'm Dawn Bjork with K-Squared Technologies. Today, we're going to explore the variety of features that are available in Microsoft Excel for linking and sharing data, whether it's within one workbook or across workbooks and more. So we'll get into that in just a moment. We encourage you to be actively involved. That is, feel free to share your questions in chat, or you can use the Q&A feature. But we want to make sure that we get your questions answered and know as well that this session is recorded so you can refer back to it for the specific steps and for additional resources for you. So here's a quick look at what we'll be exploring today. Linking within a workbook. How can you, for instance, bring in summaries or bring in totals to create a summary within a workbook? How can you also create links across workbooks? Workbooks that maybe different team members are using or that are coming from different sources. How can we bring in that data without having to just manually enter in that information? What does that look like? Hyperlinks, comments, and notes. These are all ways that we are also sharing information or linking to other resources. How do we protect our work? That's another challenge that we can have when we're sharing data, that we may not want our team members to inadvertently or to change information that we've set up in a particular way. And as time allows, how can we share our Excel data with other programs? So that's our plan. And as I mentioned, hop into chat anytime you have questions, if there's anything that I can help you with. But let's dive in to look at some of these linking and sharing features that are available in Excel. Here I have a fairly simple example, and our examples are, I want to be able to focus not on complexity within Excel, but all the different capabilities and possibilities. So this is a workbook where I want to bring in data from other sources. You might have this where you want to bring in data from different locations or from each of the months and be able to summarize it without manually typing in that information. And so I have a sheet for these different states. And in each one of them, although this isn't necessary, I have a total as well. Linking sometimes gets a reputation for being a lot more complicated than it really needs to be. If all I want to do is see the total for this data, here's all we need to do. We'll just type in an equals, just like any other formula. Just say this cell is equal to, and I'll navigate to the Texas sheet. Here's my Texas total. And we hit enter. So now I'm referencing whatever that total is. And as the data changes, then this would change as well. I don't have to know exactly where that might take place. Now let's look and see what we've accomplished here. The reference here, which I could have typed in manually, but it's a lot easier to use this pointing method. The reference simply says this cell is equal to the worksheet name, which is Texas, exclamation mark, and then the cell where that data is found. Should we insert additional rows, this will update as well. So we'll go ahead and recreate that. And we'll point to this and continue. And let's do one more. Now for this one, actually, I'm going to do it a little differently. Let's say I don't have the totals. Well, you can build in calculations into your links. And so for this, I'll say this is equal to the sum, creating that formula, and I could highlight that range. So even though there actually is a total here, if there wasn't, or if I wanted to do a calculation between, for instance, to multiply multiple values, I could do that as well. So let's get that sum in there. I'll hit enter. Excel, as you may know, puts in that close parentheses for me. So now I have that formula as well. Now, at this point, then we can total it. Keyboard shortcut for Excel to Autosum is Alt equals, and confirm that that's the correct range, which it is, and we're set. So even if we have changes to the data, let's say that I move to Colorado, and once again, I don't need to know where the changes take place, but I'll go to the Colorado sheet here and make a more significant change here. So let's say this is 50,000, and notice how it changes my total. Now we see that here as well. So that is a quick way for us to be able to create links within a workbook. Now, there's one thing I do want to point out here, because this question comes up often, and that is, if I look at the formula for New Mexico, it's a little different. What do you see there? Is one of the things that takes place or happens here is that we have this quotes. So in chat, why do we have the quote? Why would that single quote be in there? But if we look at Colorado, for instance, we don't see that. What's the difference? Why do we have one versus the other? Yep, exactly right. It's because we have a space in the name. So this is absolutely correct. This isn't something, if you're troubleshooting or having an issue with it, it's not because of those quotes. Don't delete those. And it would be okay if you also had those in the other ones, but we just don't need them because the other ones don't have a space there. So that's going to be something Excel automatically will do for you in working with that. So that's just something to give you a sense that by simply using that simple pointing method, we can build these links across the workbooks and be able to gather this information and be able to have these running totals even as our data changes or as it's input. So that is linking within a workbook. And hopefully that gives you some inspiration and some other ideas. Now we also have some other options, and there's something called 3D formulas. Now this is something more specialized, and it doesn't apply in all instances, but you might have some applications for this. So at least I want to introduce you to the idea. In this case, each one of these sheets has the same structure. So whether I'm looking at north, south, east, west, the data changes and it's for different locations. But when I say the same structure, we have our product information. That is, if we were looking here for pasta, that's in the same location in each one of these sheets. And that would be true for the other products. So the structure of the worksheets is identical. That's how 3D formulas works. But it is an example of linking in that we can actually build a formula that would reach through each one of these. So once again, rather than doing things manually, how can we be more efficient by working with some of these built-in options? And so in this case, I have a summary sheet that once again has the same structure. So think of 3D formulas as reaching through to those other locations. And here's the basic idea with that. Once again, we'll say that this is equal to sum in this case. Now it could be an average, it could be a count, but what we want to do is total this. And the sum, however, is those multiple sheets. So I'll start here in my sheet tabs and click on North and click on that first cell. Now, To be able to say through, north through, in this case, west, that's the last sheet. I'm holding down the shift key and I'll click on west. So that is a way to group or select more than one. So the logic is saying sum from north through west, in this case, cell B5. At this point, I could close paren and hit enter, or simply hit enter, and Excel will do that for me. So let's look at what that formula displays as. That's the logic. North colon west exclamation, and then that cell. That is the sum. That is a 3D formula, 3 dimensions. And in this case now, because the logic is what we call relative, that is, it's based on its location, I can actually copy this down. I'm using the fill handle. Probably familiar with that, use that in Excel a lot. I grab that little square, look for that black cross, drag it down. And now I'll drag this across as well. So now I have that logic, and if I can move to any one of these, it is simply reaching through in that same location and bringing in that data. So once again, if any one of those sheets changes, so will this end result. Now, as we had before, we could do totals for this. Here's a little trick. We don't usually get a chance to always leverage this in terms of working with it for the sum, but I have these cells highlighted, and because I've highlighted the right column and or the bottom here, if I simply do the Autosum, now remember that keyboard shortcut was Alt equals, but I can also choose it from my ribbon. And here's my sum, and Excel will populate those cells as well. So that's another option for you, or another quick way to be able to get the sums. So 3D formulas, here again, if the data changes, let's just look at an example of that. If I move to the south sheet, for instance, here, and make this a significantly larger number, not only does it change this sheet, but we will see that value also updated. So that's another way for us to be able to link or connect different worksheets and to be able to do that more easily. Now, just one last parting comment that's important to know if you are working with 3D formulas, and that is the range was north through west. Should any one of these worksheets be moved outside of the range, it would no longer be included. So for instance, if I take that south sheet, click on it and drag it to the other side of west. Okay. Now, what will happen? If I go to my 3D formulas, it's no longer including that south values. It's still saying north through west, but south is no longer being included because it's not in that range. I move it back in, even if it's in a different position, and now it is included. So that's something just to be watchful if you have data that makes sense to work with these. Now I'll go ahead for now and save this and close it, because we have some other examples to look at here. And I got so excited about that. There we go. We have some other possibilities with Excel. And for this, I have a number of different files that I want to work with. And so I'll move out to and look, grab, and here I have my New Mexico, Colorado, Texas, Wyoming, and sales summary. Now, in this case, I'm simply holding down the control key and selecting each one of those individually. You could open them up separately if you're more comfortable with that. But I'm simply holding control, click, click, click on each one of them. And now I'll open. Now, the reason why I'm doing that, or why you might do that, is that there can be situations where you may not be able to have this data all in one workbook. And so sometimes we may need to link across workbooks. Perhaps the workbooks are being managed by different people or they're used for various purposes. As long as you have access to them, they don't have to even all be in the same folder. They could be just in different locations as long as you have access to those. So let's look at what we did. Now, under View and switch windows, I can see that I have these files open along with another one for practice. So I have all of these open and available. I've taken that option and added it to my quick access toolbar, which I have moved below my ribbon. So that is just to explain, if you ever see me pop over here instead to switch to those files, it's because I've added that tool to my quick access toolbar. So I want to pause for just a moment. And as a reminder, you're welcome to hop into chat and direct a question to me if there's something specific that I can help you with, or you can use our Q&A feature for that. I want to make sure that I clarify that. So it's a very similar example that we have for from what we saw before. And sometimes linking can certainly be more complex. But the idea here is that our summary sheet is what we call our destination workbook. And the sheets that we want to reference or move to bring data to from, those are called our source workbooks. So that's just the terminology with that. Now, a destination workbook like the sales summary could be a source workbook for a different one, for some sort of report, another report. So they can be linked, in multiple ways. But in this case, I had them all open, which isn't required once you have the link set up. I just have them all open because I want to be able to create the links and to be able to build in that logic. Once I have that, then those sheets do not all have to be open at the same time, in case just for clarification, because that's often a question that I hear as well. So how do we create the link? Once again, they could be more involved with multiple calculations, but in this case, I'll simply say this Colorado is equal to, I'll move to the Colorado sheet and reference this value here and then hit enter. So that's simply creating now a formula. It's one more level to what we saw before, because now we have the workbook name that is shown in square brackets. Then the worksheet name, in this case, sheet 1, and then this absolute reference to that cell. However, even though it shows as an absolute reference, that is with the dollar signs, should we have additional data added to that, this will update. So I'll recreate that again, equal to, move to New Mexico. Here's my total. And as we saw before, we would see then that single quote. And what that single quote means is it's saying that that's a character string. It's a string of characters that are supposed to stay together. That's what we use in this case when we have a space in the name. So here's another way that we could create a link. As we saw before, we could say that this is equal to the sum. And we'll move to that Texas sheet and total this. So it can be a calculation and it can be nested functions. That is, these things can be more complex for sure. In this case, I already have the total, but if I didn't or I wanted to add it as a calculation, I could do that. And one other way. Now, I don't think this is the fastest way, but it is another way. And if you were to do a search on how to link across, you might see this as a technique. In this case, we'll start on the Wyoming side. And I have this total. Next, I'll do a copy. Now I'm going to just do Control-C for copy, but you could right-click and copy. You could use the options in the Home tab. But in this case, I've got a copy on that. And now I'll move back to my destination sales summary, and I have some options. I want to paste the link. Now I could do that under the Home tab, and here we have paste, or I could right click here, and here is paste link. That's what I'll choose. Of course, that just went away for some reason. There we go. Now, I still have the end result, same end result. So it doesn't change the way that this behaves or this works. Once again, if the data changes, then for instance, if I went to the Texas sheet here, Texas workbook, and made a change to the data, my total is changed. Let me make that column a little wider. There we go, that's changed. So now you can see that I have a bigger total for that. Move back to sales summary, and there it is as well. Go ahead and total these, Alt equals. But the key here is that I wouldn't have to have these all open all at the same time and be making that work. That is one of the reasons why we might have to be summarizing this from different workbooks, is that someone else might have it, be working on it, or have it open, and we may not always be accessing them at the same time. So let's look at some different options with that to see how these things can be updated, and the fact that they don't all have to be open. First of all, I'll go ahead and save. You can use options on your quick access toolbar or file save. I just use Control S as a keyboard shortcut for that. And I'll do a couple things here. First of all, I'll close that Texas sheet. And one of the things that happens here, notice this link. Now, this is why links probably look a little bit confusing, because now that file is no longer open. And for that reason, I have the full path here in terms of that reference. That's how it knows where that information is and if that data was changed. So now we'll make a couple other modifications here. Let's say, for instance, what I'm going to do here is I'll close my sales summary. Once again, I'll save this. And let's look at my Colorado sheet. So right now, my total for Colorado is a little over 72,000. My sales summary is no longer open. And at this point, maybe someone else is working on it, or I'm working on it. There isn't anything here that's going to tell me that this file is being linked or referenced in another workbook. So that can be challenging sometimes, especially our links will no longer be valid if the file names or the location changes. So let's go ahead and look at how this might work for us. I'll change this to 25,000. So that is changed my value, 89,450. I'll save this, and then just in the process of working with it, at some point I might close it down. Absolutely fine. Now, I'll go back to, and I'm going to open it. So notice that this time period could be over, several hours, several days, weeks, and now at this point, I open up my sales summary. Here's some things that happen. First of all, now that this file has links in it, you'll see that there's a warning here. By default, those links have been disabled. That is just a security piece, because if this was a file that you were not familiar with, if this is a file where you did not know the source of it, this is there to protect you so that you're not opening something that could introduce malware or other security issues. And so that's one of the things that we want to just caution you about with that. But in this case, I trust the source, so I will enable the content. Notice the Colorado value here. Now, I don't have to enable the content if I just want to look up something really quickly, but if there's links, that's a good idea because this data might have changed. So in this case, I'll go ahead and enable content. It will once again prompt me, do you trust it? Yes. And then this value changes. Once again, I don't need to know all of the places where those values might have changed, but they will be pushed forward whether or not these files are open or not. So that's one of the things as well. Well, one of the considerations too, and if you do the linking, it's not just about setting up the links, but managing the links. So where do we have this information? Well, this is just as important should you be linking across workbooks. And that is found for us under the Data tab. And under the Data tab, we have Edit Links. Now, this will be grayed out if there aren't any links in this active or current workbook. In this case, it is available, but other workbooks wouldn't necessarily have this available. So what this will do for us is it will show us, regardless of where you are in this file, it will show you where there are links. It won't tell you specifically all the different locations, but it will tell you which workbooks. And you can see that in some of these, you can see for all of them, you'll see the path, the location, but the type, remote file, means that that file is not currently open. Okay? It's not currently open. And in this case, then, it doesn't have to be, but know that there's some different ways to manage it. Let's say I'd like to open up that Colorado file. Now, I could just go into it like normal and move to the location and open it. But from this Edit Links, I can also open the source. So it becomes available to me as well. And as I mentioned, if we go to Data and Edit Links, we wouldn't see it available here because there aren't any links in this particular file. I'll go back to my sales summary, and there could be other things that can happen as well with it. That is, we might want to edit links, or we might want to make other changes. So let's look at another problem that can happen with our linking, and then I'll share with you how you can best, how you can then manage these links when you no longer want them, or when you want to capture the data in a certain time. So let's go to our Wyoming file. Let's just say that whether or not the sales summary was open, but in this case it is. Now, actually, I'll say because it is open, this is where we can have a problem. So maybe I want to store this or capture it for a certain point in time. I want to say at this point, I'd like to save it because I have other things I want to do with it. So I'm going to save a copy of it, and I'll call it Wyoming, June 2021, for instance. Okay. So now I've saved that, but my intention is to do something completely different with it. And I might just continue working with it in that way. I can close it at some point. But without realizing it, perhaps, what has happened here in the sales summary, because they were both open here, is we can go to Edit Links. And now this file is linking to that copy, not the original one. The other challenge can be as if a file is renamed, not where a copy is made, but it's renamed. So Edit Links can be a place where you might need to manage these in multiple ways, where you might need to change the source, that is to point to it because the file's not found, or we need to change the source because we're pointing to the wrong file. So in this case, I'll go ahead and change the source. And what I want to do then is point to that original file and okay. Okay, so let's get that let's get that file opened. There we go. And it should now be referencing the correct location. But that's one of the things. You don't have to be necessarily in edit links all the time, but it's a good way to make sure that if you're doing links across workbooks, that you're using this to kind of audit your work and make sure that it is still active. And Excel will tell you if a file is moved or it can't find it, it will tell you that there's a problem with it reconnecting. And so that is another piece there. Let's wrap this up by finalizing this workbook. And that is, it's the end of the quarter, the end of the month, it's the end of the year, and I want to capture it at this particular point in time. Or I want to share it with someone external to my organization. And if they're external to my organization, they would not have access to those other files. So then that you probably had that happen. You open up something someone sent you via email, for instance, and then it has all of these broken links because those are links to things that are on their system, not yours. But in this case, I'll go ahead and do a save as. And I'll make this my sales summary final, or it could be, end of year, whatever might make sense for that. And I want to now break the links. So here's what this looks like. I'll go to Data, Edit Links, select all of these files, these links, whether or not the files are open. They do not have to be. So in this case, I'm holding down the Shift key and clicking on the last one. So first one, hold Shift, click on the last one, and I'll break the link. So now we're getting warned. It's a good thing, because is that really what I wanted it to do? And also telling us we might want to save a version of the file with a new name, which is what we did. So I'll break the links. Notice I no longer have any links, and close. None of these are just raw data. This is not, there aren't any formulas anymore in these values. I've captured it at this particular point in time. Notice under the data tab, I no longer have edit links either. But now this is something that I can distribute without referencing or pointing to other workbooks that I may not want people to have access to, but they wouldn't also have access to because they wouldn't be able to have access to those network or those cloud locations. So that's one of the other things to keep in mind as we're looking at working with links, is that you can also break them. So this becomes a more shareable or shareable file, or it's a way to capture what you had at a particular point in time versus when you have the other links where it's just ongoing. So that's another possibility with that. So we've looked at linking across workbook within a workbook. We've looked at 3D formulas and linking across workbooks. So those are some different linking options. Let's explore a little bit further here. We have some other possibilities for linking, and sometimes it's a little bit different. Sometimes it's where we are simply linking to an email address, or it's a link to another document. So that's also possible in Excel. For instance, if I'm capturing email addresses, then one of the options I would have here, if I'm typing in my email address and hit enter, notice what happens. It automatically changes to a clickable link. That's a hyperlink. So whether it's a web address or an email address, this is now clickable. I can click on this and launch an email. Now that might be exactly what you want. Notice the formatting changes, and that would be, as I said, that might be exactly what you want. If I didn't want that, that is, if it was just like, oops, I don't want that. After all, I can do an undo or Control Z, and that would undo. I would still get the content, but it would undo that last step, which was to convert it to a hyperlink. Now, I'm not saying hyperlinks are bad. It's just that it depends upon your work with it. Certainly, if I wanted to edit this, you'd be best off moving up to the formula bar or hitting the F2 function key, because if you click, you'll end up launching that. But if you're capturing a lot of information where you do not want it to be a clickable link for some reason, that is something you actually can turn off. So we looked at how we could do the undo with that, but it can be turned off as well if that is something that's not helpful for you, or you just want to turn it off for a particular case in time. I'll show that to you really quickly, and then we'll look at some other options for working with links. I'll move to File, Options. I'll try that again. Well, for some reason, my file options does not want to work today. So what we'll do, or what I'll to tell you where that is, that's under File Options and under Proofing. And under Proofing, then we have our autocorrect options. That's very funky. Okay, well, fair enough. So under Proofing, then you will find it under Auto Format as you type. It's just a whether or not we have hyperlinks. But using just the undo for those occasional cases, you can turn it on or off. And so it's a very easy thing normally to be able to correct or to fix that. Let's move forward and look at some other examples of hyperlinks. In this case, perhaps I have a document that I want to link to. Maybe it's instructions, it's a PDF, it's a location on your website. It could be any number of things. Now, in this case, that's a hyperlink. We would do this under Insert. Now, what we link to has to be something that the recipient or someone who has access to this file would be able to have access to. So keep that in mind in terms of where things might be stored. So I could either click on link here, and I could link to something that I have available, or I could use Control K. Either one is an option for you. So Control K is another option for us. Notice there's some different options here too. Is it an existing file? Is it a place in that document? Is it an email address? So an existing file also could be a web address. So it could be a web location. In this case, I'll have it linked to a Word document, but it could be a PDF. And here again, it could just be something internal and you want to provide it from a learning perspective or from a reference perspective. But now I'm creating a link here to that document. Now that's not very pretty, even though that's where it's located. So I'll press Control K again here. And I could have typed this in initially as well. And here I'll say, click for important document, okay, whatever that might be. So be very specific with it normally. And here I'll okay. So now that makes it more clear rather than having it be simply the path. And I could actually click on this and it would actually open up that file. Perhaps we'll go ahead here. Okay, well, trust me, because of where the file is located, then so you can see every once in a while these things happen when we're in live, but in this case what that would do, it would open up that file and it would actually make that available. So trust me on that. Go ahead and try it yourself. That's the easiest way rather than saying trust me on that one. So go ahead and see. But that if I have that file actually open, then that would happen for me as well, but I don't have to. So it just has to be a link that it will move to for you. Now, another way that we could create those kinds of links, let's go back to our coffee file for a moment. Here again, just as a quick example, imagine that it's a much more complex workbook and you have sheets for each week or location or other projects, and you want to move to those quickly. So we can actually create links to other locations. Once again, that's under Insert, and here we have Link. And in this case, actually, I'll go ahead and put that on, not on the value, but on the label here. I'll create a link, place in this file, and I'm going to make it to point to Texas, and then OK. So I've actually created a hyperlink. I can change the formatting here. I can go back to making that, bold or a different size, but that creates a clickable link that would take me right to that Texas file. So yes, I have it right down here in the bottom in the sheet tabs, but it might be much more cumbersome if you have 15 different sheets to go to, for instance. And this becomes a quick way for us to work with it. And we can even create a link in this one if we wanted to go back to that sales summary. So that's another way for us to create hyperlinks in Excel with our documents. I'll pause once again. You're welcome to send questions just to me as a panelist, or if you have anything else that you're curious about. But let me know, is there something that I can clarify or something you'd like to see in more detail before we move on? Let me know that in chat. Or is there something specifically you've seen that's really helpful for you or that you'll be able to start applying? Share that as well. Let me know how we can help support you to be able to make the most of working with Excel. Let's look at some other options then. So as we move forward, I'll share with you some options for protection and comments and notes. That is how this is also about sharing your data. In the case of protection, you might have files that, whether they're internal or external, where you don't want people to make changes to certain aspects of that worksheet. It could be that it's just a formatting issue, or you might have people that are inserting rows and columns in the wrong place. So there's whatever you want to do to protect the integrity of that worksheet. So the protection features we look at here are worksheet specific. And the idea is, I don't want anyone to change anything about this except that they can change these data values. That's the only thing I want them to be able to change. Everything else, whether because of the formatting or the structure, I want to protect. And without really noticing it, one of the things that we have in Excel, and it doesn't matter which cell I go to, so I'll just move to one randomly here. There is by default a protection feature enabled. So can come in to format this. I could right click and choose format cells. Control-1 is another way to get there. And you'll see that there's a tab here for protection. By default, without us doing anything, the cell is set with a property of locked. But you'll notice the explanation here as well. These properties don't have any effect until you protect the worksheet. So at this point, it's just sitting there with that property, but it doesn't really matter until we enable that. So what that means is that if we enable the protection, then that will prevent these cells from being accessed. Well, I'd like them to, that means there isn't too much I have to change, but I will highlight this range here because I would like people to be able to access that once I enable protection. I'll right click, left click on protect cells, and only for what's selected, I'll uncheck locked. Okay, so far, nothing has happened, and I don't have to be on those cells anymore when I enable this. Let's look at how we do that. We go to review, and here is protect sheet. So protect the sheet. Now, you have the option of putting in a password to make it more difficult for people to unprotect. The caution on this is that no one else will be able to, that is, K-Score Technologies will not be able to fix this for you. There are sometimes some workarounds that aren't very pretty, and you'll lose some of the formatting and other aspects of your data. So it can be helpful if you have something. You might have something that's agreed upon with your team, that if we're doing a lot of protection, that this is the password we use, so it's not something personal to you, or you may elect not to use the password. But with that, it will be easier for people to unprotect if they really wanted to work with that. So some cautions, that is not saying don't use passwords or that you should absolutely, but no, they're case sensitive. You will, if you forget it or you don't know it, and that's always why we're concerned that other team members are putting that on there and not telling us what they are, things like that. So I'll put in a simple password. We should not use things like password and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and things like that. And so I would normally want to have a more involved here, but notice that when it's protected, what will I let people do? Well, maybe I don't want them to do any of these things. Only want them to be able to select the cells and perhaps make changes to it. So now it's protected. We can see under review, we see unprotect, but unless I know that password, I would not be able to unprotect it. So here I'll make a change. I can do that. I come over here, trying to make a change, and I'll be told you can't do that. And the reason why we sometimes will do passwords is because, Excel basically tells us how we can unprotect it. However, I do want, to caution with that. But that is another way for us to manage your data when other people might have access to it, and by being able to do protection. So, is that something that would be helpful for you? Is that something that would give you some more options? Let's wrap up with a few other ways for us to share data and to be able to work with it in Excel. For this, we have, if we're sharing data with other people, whether they're inside our organization or outside, comments and notes might also be helpful. Now, in the more recent versions of Excel, if you're using Excel 365 or Excel for Microsoft 365, what used to be notes, what used to be comments are now called notes, and comments are something kind of a step up. They're threaded. So what that means is that here I have a comment. You'll notice I hover over it, has a little purple corner, and you can see that we have multiple people. Now, if I click on this, I can see that as well. And up in the review tab here, I can say show comments, which opens up a comments pane, and you will see then the different comments here. So this means as well that we can reply to it and have an ongoing conversation about that. Now, maybe that's something that happens instead in teams, or you manage in different ways, but that's the idea of comments now in working with Excel. And you can see that we can also navigate between these if we have multiple comments. So how we create that, simply move to a cell, can say new comment. But usually we use comments because we want other people to work with it or to notice it. And now I've added that comment to it. Now that's different than a note. A note is going to lay a little post-it that you have on a cell. So if I move to notes, I can also show all of those if you want to. That's the way that comments used to work. So with notes, it is just simply as a notation. It's to explain something. whether it's the purposes of that particular column or something that's a little different than the other values. There can be all sorts of different possibilities. So it's not that you pick one or, that one's right or one's wrong. They just have different. If you're interacting with other people, that's where comments can be helpful. If you simply want to share some information and you don't need any type of feedback or response, then maybe all you need to do is create a note. In this case, I'll create another one and say, and these are sizable, so you can change the dimensions of them, but just think of them as little mini Post-its. I'll go back to notes here and turn off the show so that there's, in this case, there, I can see that there's comments, there's notes there, but they're not currently displayed. So that's another way for us to interact when we're sharing data and to be able to have these different options. And so explore those to see how that might be helpful for you. Let's wrap up with just a couple other things in terms of working with sharing data and some different options that are available to us. So if you are sharing data externally, one of the things you might also want to look for and to do, in this case, I've saved this file, is to do something called Inspect Document. And that is found under File, Info. Oops, now I have, in this case, I'll need to unprotect if I want. I don't have to, but in this case, because I have that protection, I won't be able to do the inspection. And so Inspect Workbook. What this does is it gives us a way in here. So check for issues, inspect document. It's going to look for things. So for instance, notice what's the date? There might be things like who is the author on that? And so it will check these things for us so that we're not sharing more information, what's called metadata, when we're sharing this information externally. So I'll have that document, I'll inspect it, and we can see, well, I didn't have any personal information here, but I did have comments. So I could remove all those comments from this file, especially if I was concerned that people might see that information. So we don't necessarily have to remove everything that shows up here, but it's a way for us to be able to then see that what it is that we might be inadvertently sharing when we're sharing this file externally. So that's another piece to look at. Let's wrap up then with how do we share data with other programs? And here I've got my tropical trips, and let's go ahead and bring up Word. And I'll go ahead and open and bring up a file here for this. So here's my, now I could have just started with the blank file if it made more sense. But in this particular case, I simply want to, I could bring in data specifically related to the purpose of this document. And now let's go ahead and switch back over to our Excel file. So here I have this data that I'd like to share in that document. One of the things to keep in mind, whether we're bringing it into Word or we're bringing it into PowerPoint, is we don't want it to be very complex. That is, we have a smaller container, whether it's a Word document or a PowerPoint slide. So we need to be careful, or it might be just a summary that we're bringing in rather than too much detail. In this case, I want to bring in this data, and it might be something that's linked, or it might just be pasted in. First, I have it highlighted, and I'll do a copy. So I just did a Control-C for copy. We'll move back over to that document. There we go. And I have some different options for that. If I right click, I can do my paste. So maybe here I want to paste it as a link, or I want to link it and keep source formatting. Or maybe I just want to bring it in as regular data. Notice I'm hovering over these different options. I might want to keep the source formatting here. So what are my options? Well, here's my first one. And in this case, then I'm simply bringing it in. It's just the numbers, and I could continue with my report. That is certainly your easiest one and probably your most likely option as you're working with your data. Now, you'll notice here, and I've just changed my zoom on this so we could see that there's some different options. I brought this in, and I could have a link to this. Now, look, now if I link it, that means as there's changes, they will come forward. Now, the only problem here has to do with some formatting issues. And I could play around with that and work with it. So we won't explore that right now. But what that means is this is actually linking to my original data. This is actually linking to that. And so that would be another possibility for me working with it. It's not something we change here. It's something that could change in that original source. So let's just do something, look at something really, make this 25,000 with that. I'll save the file. And with this, then we're going to update the link. I just did a right click on that. And now you can see the 25,000. It's my recommendation to you is that you bring the data in saying it's done, it's complete, only because we often have formatting issues, as you saw. And here again, does everyone on your team, are they comfortable with the link? Do they know to update that? Are they going to make other changes to that? That might not suit it very well. But we can take this data, and using our various paste options, you can share it with your other Office programs. So hopefully that's giving you a number of different options for you in terms of how you can link and share data in Microsoft Excel. Take a moment and, if you will, share in chat. What are your takeaways? What's something that you have picked up that either was new for you, maybe a reminder of some capabilities? Do you have some new ways for you to be able to work with Excel? Go ahead and share that in chat. Let me know what Excel tips or takeaways you've learned. What is helpful for you? Go ahead and let us know there. Excellent. I saw one reminder, just like it just, it gives me some ideas for an upcoming project, handling budgets. Now it's not quite so mysterious. Links used to be scary before. All right. Well, that's always our goal here with each one of our monthly training sessions, is that we take some of the mystery out of it and always look for how you can save time and different shortcuts for you as well. So thank you for being part of this training. Want to let you know, and this is just a reminder, that the K-Square Technologies training webinars are once a month on the second Tuesday of every month. And coming up, we have a two-part series on PowerPoint. So we'll give you I'll share with you some of the things for you. Another comment here, comments and notes are great. It's all new. Well, now it's not anymore, right? Thanks. So we have a two-part PowerPoint series. You get some of the things that you might not have known are possible in PowerPoint, and then we'll be able to go into and leverage some of those artificial intelligence and some of the really cool design features. We'll do that in August, and then we'll come back to Excel again and move into some more intermediate advanced features on how you can analyze your data with something called Power Pivot. So we'll continue to look for, always share with us, a survey is going to come up for you after the session. Let us know what topics you'd like to see. We have a number of topics already planned out for you, but I definitely want to make sure that we are serving you as well. So that's been our look at linking and sharing data in Excel. How can we help you be more productive? Let us know. Please reach out to us for IT services and consulting to support your Microsoft technologies. Thanks so much for joining us. We'll see you next month.